Okay. So welcome everybody to this August 2022 webinar hosted by ODLAA. And ODLAA is the Open and Distance Learning Association of Australia. You can see some information about ODLAA on the screen at the moment. If you're not already a member, please consider joining the association. You can find all the information you need and the benefits of membership on the ODLAA website. And you can see the link to the website there. One of the star attractions of ODLAA is its journal, and that's called Distance Education. This is what it looks like. You might not be able to see it, but and as a member, you get access to a hard copy of that journal, which is really good for those of you who might be in an institution that doesn't subscribe to it, or you can't get access to it via your institution's library. And if you didn't realize it, you wouldn't realize it. The editor-in-chief of the journal will be here with us today. He's running a bit late, but he'll be here. Many of the topics of our webinar series this year have been presented by authors who have been published in recent issues of the journal. And today we have exactly that. I would like to introduce you to the authors of a really interesting and helpful article published in the November 2021 issue. Welcome Sanjay Mishra, who's from the Commonwealth of Learning in Canada. Welcome Dr. Siddhartha Sahu from Banaras Hindu University in India. And, from the National Centre for Ocean Information. Is that right? Dr.
Yes.
Yes, I got that mixed up. Okay. Their article, there's another author too, their article is called Research Trends in Online Distance Learning During the COVID-19 Pandemic. I don't know about you, but I really love review articles as they pull together a quantum of research and explain themes and trends. And the insights that sort of analysis and then the synthesis provides are, in my view, priceless. Hence my description of this article earlier as being not only interesting, but also helpful. It's helpful because it provides readers with a good sense of the landscape. And in this instance, the developing landscape of online distance education during recent times, which is just perfect for all sorts of things that are going on. I talk personally within our institution and the thinking and the changes in perceptions that are happening at the moment. So now I'd like to hand over to Sanjaya and Dr. Sahu to lead you through their presentations. Please feel free to put your comments or questions in the chat as we go along, and we'll attempt to make sure that we respond to those during the session or at the end. So over to you.
Thank you, Sarah, and greetings to everyone on the session today. Thank you very much for joining us for this presentation, and I'm sure you have read this paper published in 2021. We are going to give a quick summary of the paper and highlight the key findings. And the presentation will be kind of a mixed interactive one with myself and Dr. Sahu speaking to the slides. Unfortunately, our third co-author, Dr. Sriram Pandey, who used to be in Banaras Hindu University and now in the Central University of Haryana in India, is not able to join us today this morning. It's because it's a very early morning and he doesn't have internet access, a good internet access. So having said that context and about ourselves at 3 different places, I being in the Commonwealth of Learning, Dr. Pandey was in Banaras Hindu University, and Dr. Sahu at the Research Center in Hyderabad in India. We got together out of our own interest in the field of bibliometrics and scientometrics analysis, and interest in distance online learning, and we started thinking about the way research in distance online learning was going on during the pandemic period. And this is the major motivation how this research came into being. We were looking into the closure of teaching and learning operations. Over 1.4 billion learners were affected in 166 countries by April 2020. Most institutions were trying to move to distance online learning. And because of those things, a lot of research papers were getting published. Some people used to make fun that teachers are on free, they are not having teaching roles, they are writing papers. But we also we realized that it is the professional responsibility of the teachers when they are going into the new field. They were trying to reflect and sharing their experiences, and those, therefore, more and more papers were getting published in the diverse field, diverse journals. That observation led us to think about what is that trend currently happening after 1 year of this study, 1 year of distance online learning practice. Because we observed a lot of papers getting published, irrespective of the problems of access to technology, bandwidth, teacher capacities, and whether or not distance online learning is suitable for all a learner age group. The number of papers were more, and therefore we thought that it's a good number that will help us to go through, analyze both through an automated process and through a review process to make sense of where the research trends are going. What is this new contribution? Where are the new contribution? What is that happening? So that is how we started the research. And we focused on research questions. Focusing on that, we wanted it to be more about a publication trend analysis. We thought about asking research questions as, what is the global trend of publications on online distance education during this period? Who are contributing this? Which disciplines are contributing this? Where these papers are getting published? How is the research authorship patterns going on? What is the thematic areas of research? All those issues we thought of from a bibliometric point of view to analyze. And for that purpose, we use the base database as Scopus. At this stage, Dr. Sao, would you like to take us through this slide?
Yes, yes, sir. Thank you. After we have taken a window period of almost a year, from January 2020 to January 2021. So initially we have started initial search. We have compared two databases, Web of Science as well as Scopus, but we find that Scopus was coverage is higher than Web of Science in the field of online learning. So we have adopted a search string, very particular search string, and we found that around 525 papers were published during this period of 1 year, approximately 1 year. So we, for that fixing the search string, we have used we have adopted a complete the Prisma framework, and the data were retrieved using Boolean operator, as well as identifying the prominent keywords in this field. So in further in 525 records, we have again limited into only those documents which are published in English, and then we have screened out for around 478 records actually based on what we got, that out of 509 paper, there were 31 papers which doesn't have, those are not relevant to this field, as well as even some of the paper documents doesn't have abstract. So in that phase of selections, we have excluded around 31 records, and we have come to 478 papers. We have used 478 papers for all bibliometric indicators, and from there there were 330 papers which were full text article. So for visualization purpose, we have used again from this 330 records, around 112 records. Those are peer review articles, but without any explicit research methods. So we have further refined, and the studies which are included mainly quantitative for synthesis, we have used 478 records, but for the thematic visualizations, we have used only 218 records out of these 330 full text papers. So moreover, this was basically the getting the documents in online learning and distance education in 525 records, then further English language, then non-relevant, excluding non-relevant records, then peer-reviewed journals article, 330 records. So this was our strategy, and entire data was collected from the Scopus database, and in even we have codified in fast page also. We have coded all these 478 papers, and we have we have different categories, like whether these papers are focused in K-12 education, or further we have categorized. So this is our strategic, which includes identification, then screening, eligibility, and those records we have included for our study.
Thank you. This whole process was carried out by all three of us, as initially one person worked on the analysis, which was Dr. Sahu, and then the whole process was reiterated and reviewed and vetted by the other two researchers. So and wherever we had doubts, we had online Zoom sessions to clarify and agree on to certain things, that okay, this is on a category of X, this is on a multiple, going into multiple categories. So for analysis of the publication patterns, the research methods, we discussed on the criteria of, okay, this paper is case study method, okay, this is the definition, and we agree on this. So we and when we were not agreeing, we used to flag those things for a Zoom session to work and agree for our common understanding, and okay, finalizing the categorization for future analysis. Based on that, the paper is worked out, and I'll just run through some of the key highlights of the paper. What we see is that in terms of publication types, about 70% of the papers were, which can be considered articles. The next was around 16%, 17% were conference papers, which were also published in peer-reviewed journals. But there were also review papers, editorials, letters, and so on. So because of 478, okay, this is not looking into the peer-reviewed paper alone. This is looking into non-peer-reviewed papers from the Scopus database. So, but broadly, articles were the key on this. And the publication focus was, interestingly, mostly in post-secondary environment. About 68% were on the post-secondary. So what is the analysis we found is that while the K-12 sector was in the facing greatest challenge, not many research on K-12 were getting published, not many reflections, not many articles were getting published. Here, if you find the 330 is the peer-reviewed set of papers. So only about 10% of papers were getting published. This is actually a key insight from those things, that more research is probably needed in the area of K-12 for online distance learning. And we also saw that a lot of questions being raised in popular media about the suitability of online learning for K-12 education, particularly at lower grades. The next issue is about subject-wise distribution, and we found some very interesting trend here, with social science getting about 64% of the papers, and next to it came medicine and health science. So from this study we find that there was a trend to from doctors, medical professionals, teachers in medical schools adapting to online learning to a large extent during that period and publishing in that period. In the literature, we have also found that in general, medical and health science topics in online learning used to be published, but the rank for those will normally used to be third, fourth in the disciplinary category. But this time we found it quite a jump in the papers published from health science professional. Then of course the computer science, which is primarily getting more papers published computer science and social science used to be number 1 and 2 to a large extent in other similar publications that we have reviewed in the paper. Most productive countries, we found that papers came from about 88 countries during the period. And that is something also illuminating to us as researchers, that so many people around the world are doing research and distance and online learning. Probably this is also a gain in terms of the impact of COVID-19, a positive gain in terms of COVID-19, that more research in more countries happening on the topic. We made a great, interesting analysis of using Pareto's law, and we found that 20% of the countries actually contributed over 80% of papers. So, and in those 20% countries were about 18 countries, of which United States become number 1 as the highest contributor, and also having highest, of course, and then second was Saudi Arabia, third United Kingdom. But interestingly, if you look at this table, the relative citation index, the highest is 1.96. That is from Canada. The highest is 3.30 from United Kingdom, followed by Canada, then 1.55 from India, then United States. So this is something interesting, that more research is getting published in United States, whereas more cited research coming from United Kingdom. So that's something interesting to highlight on this slide. We found top journals. We listed about 10 top journals here, and if you see, Journal of Chemical Education published more number of papers during that period. Then of course the usual other journals, Education Technology Research and Development, in Information Learning Sciences. Many of them here you will also see are open access journals, like Sustainability is one open access journal who publishing more papers during the period. But the key thing is that we found is that research in online distance learning are getting published more in a diverse field of papers. It's not just getting published in the core distance education journals. So researchers, if today are looking at key journals of distance education, they will be missing substantive number of papers published in other non-core journals which have been publishing on open and distance learning. This is also a new trend that has come up during this period. We also found that the authorship pattern, we really found a mixed authorship pattern with about 20% single author. But if you take that out, that means about 80% papers are multiple author papers, which was a norm in science, medicine, and other fields. And more social science was more individual research kind of thing. So collaborative research has increased during this period. This finding shows a higher level of collaborative research, multi-author papers in open distance learning during this period. We also found that about 1/3 of the research papers published indicated no research method. The rigor of research has always been a question for researchers in the discipline of distance and online learning. And we found that this is still remains a major question. But we see that this is probably due to the expediency of emergency remote teaching, that many people may not have used research methods but have used descriptive approaches to write research papers, or case study approach to write research papers. So we find about 43% quantitative approach to research and 13% qualitative research. Now, interestingly, what we have seen is that in 2001, the research Burge and Borjowski found that 62.7% of articles published between 1990 to 1990 were research-based. So, it's almost similar to that. Today, also about 39.3% without research methods. Earlier, it was at that point 62.7% were having some research approach. Olaf, Joachim Richter, and others in 2009 showed a split of 29.1% of quantitative research and 29.2% of qualitative research in 5 journals of distance education they studied. So if you see that in this study, the quantitative research percentage has substantially increased during this period. Dr. Sahu, over to you for these next 2 slides.
Yeah. So then considering this data, so we have used 3 visualization approaches to get to know the theme-based analysis, and we have used 3 different visualization methods with 3 applications. First was used site space was used for visualizing the co-citation analysis, and then VS Viewer tools was used to give keywords clusters analysis, and then another tool Lexmaner was used to get the theme-based analysis. So we have the site space has given it has given us it has clusters into different different, all these publications are, it has included around roughly 10,000 valid reference. It has created 120 notes and then 299 links. So it has clusters into 6 clusters, major clusters. If you look at the clusters, those clusters are mainly focused on remote teaching, then accessing the distance learning, then emergency online teaching, and then controlled trial, then virtual learning environment. So these are the research focus of co-citation analysis has indicated that remote teaching is one of the emerging area in this field, as well as along with this, these are the focus of on these publications. Then if we, sir, can we go to next slide, sir? Yeah, we use a VUS application tools to develop the keyword clusters, and we have put a threshold of prominent keywords which are minimum occurrence more than 5, and then we have made these clusters. So the clusters were basically grouped into 4 major clusters, which indicates that if you look at the first, and it is distinguished by different colors. So the size of the bubbles, it indicates the influence of the keywords, as well as also it's the how it is linked with other research. The cluster maps are grouped into 4 major groups. First group was technologies for teaching and learning. These clusters mainly consist of 35, and we found that around 97 keywords, prominent keywords, are mainly included in these 4 clusters. So this 35 indicates that in the first cluster focused on technology for teaching and learning in the learning context. But in second cluster, the theme of the focus was psychosocial issues, and this is basically impacting the psychological teaching and learning due to COVID-19, and also the logistical issues and then research approaches. In the third clusters, it's the focus was about learner, and it was how the present issues, it has present the issues impacting the students in different contexts. Also communicate, like how it is including communication and satisfaction of the learners, and then social distancing issues. In the fourth cluster of this map was mainly focused on, it's covering mixed bag, technology as well as teaching, learning, and the training, sustainability, and psychological issue. So the entire cluster map indicate these highlights. These are the focus of during that time. The focus was during on these topics. So in the, so can you go to next slide, sir? Yes, sir. I think, sir, you would like to explain this.
Yeah, we used a software called Leximancer to analyze you use the abstract of the 330 articles and run through the Leximancer software. And Leximancer automatically gave a cluster of a concept map, which clearly identifies groups of papers which are correlated and similar in nature, and what are the key things that came out in that direction. So one is the general focus on technology enabled blended online learning as an alternative. The second was its focus on higher education as such. The third one is about the academics, their role, and the systemic aspect. The other one is an impact of the COVID-19 pandemic as such. Then, of course, the innovations related to remote teaching and impact on face-to-face, and the sixth point is about social. So if you look at the 3 different approaches of clustering, there are many similarities, and all these things were done for the first time in a single paper in this article. And what we found is that there is similarity in the approaches, that bibliometric approaches, use of Leximancer thematic approaches. And so in future, one of the methodological takeaway from this is that use of a single approach for analyzing concepts map beyond human approaches. These 3 were machine approaches to clustering, from human approach to concept mapping or clustering. So we can fairly and safely analyze data in future using any of these 3 approaches is one of the takeaways from this paper. So with that, I would like to highlight some of the key features of this study before we go to take it to questions and interactions with colleagues attending this session. Journal article, definitely a predominant source of publication. Most research are coming from post-secondary educators, which also means that there is a lot of research focus needed on K-12 education, teaching and learning settings. Discipline-wise, social science is still continues to be the trend. Education is a social science field, but people from other disciplines, computer science, health, medicine have been contributing also substantially in the field of open and distance learning. And therefore, the key takeaway is that if researchers in the field of distance online learning need to focus on other disciplines, journals in other disciplines, and fringe, which used to be fringe journals for us, will become a major journals for the issue of distance and online learning. Collaborative research has become a trend, as over more than 80% of the papers are multi-authored papers. Still, 1/3 of the papers do not have research methods, which is a major matter of concern, and those tends to be opinion based, but could be reflective in nature as well. And the discipline is more dependent on quantitative research, particularly from the one-year data analysis that we see. The subject-wise thematic analysis using 3 different approaches clearly indicates that remote teaching has received more traction in the period of the study, which of course could be considered as one form of distance learning. Assessment of distance learning, assessment of students in distance learning become a very important topic, is a matter of concern, particularly in online learning, and emergency online teaching and learning, creation of virtual learning environment, and preparing students. We in the field of distance and online learning have been focusing on students' readiness to leverage the power of online learning or distance learning from the very beginning, but this has become a key issue for researchers, teachers who worked on distance online learning during this period. So I think what is the major takeaway for practitioners and policymakers? What we see is that during a lot of papers discuss issues related to planning, because ODL normally requires a lot of planning, which could not be done during the pandemic period. So everything was emergency and emergency remote teaching and learning. But issues related to hardware, access to technology, bandwidth, those are critical issues that governments need to focus if distance online learning is going to be a mainstream feature in future. Similarly, researchers and practitioners need to focus more research on K2 level education. Currently, the focus is largely on post-secondary education. But what we found is that there is a positive development in the field, that more researchers have started to see distance and online learning as a field of research and a new emerging discipline. And this shows, and they are more interested in how higher education can be future-proof beyond the challenges of COVID-19 in future. So I would stop at this stage, and this is the contact slide Sarah will probably talk about later. but let me stop this slide and go back to the main screen for interaction, and we would love to hear from people who are participating in this session.
Yeah, thank you both. Yeah, really engaging and interesting presentation. I have a question about the slide relating to the research. I don't know whether you can put that slide back up, but I thought the interesting piece there was how many published papers do not detail a research methodology. Yeah, did I have that right?
Yeah, so when we looked at the peer-reviewed papers, we found that about 33%, 34% of the papers were not having any research method.
Yeah, I mean, it's surprising even that a paper gets published in the absence of detailing the research methodology. Yeah. 33%, yeah, nearly 34% don't detail the research methodology. It could have been one person that they spoke to in the street or the bus stop. Could it?
Is there a possibility that there's a link between that phenomenon and the fact that there seemed to be an increased number of papers published in non-traditional distance education journals, perhaps, as you mentioned there's in the chemical education or some of the other journals that maybe wouldn't normally have this kind of stuff? Could it have been that the authors or those papers got past the gate posts or the gates without being checked or being, yeah.
Sarah, Jay, I think what we are reflecting on that kind of trend is that they are peer-reviewed papers, okay? They're all peer-reviewed journals and they were taken from Scopus, and we had higher number of papers in the data set. We looked at the peer-reviewed papers who were 330 number peer-reviewed papers. So they have definitely gone through the peer review, but our assumption and our thinking is that some of those papers which we attributed as no research method are basically which do not have a section on methodology. Okay, so you can see that there could be a reflective papers, they could be opinion-based papers, but they were, to us, they were articles. We are not continuing their research papers, but they were published in peer-reviewed journals, but not necessarily with a section on methodology. So that is how we categorize those papers, and we still see this is a trend. This is not a different trend in what we have seen in other published papers, similar papers. In 2001, we have seen papers which says that only 62% of papers in the field of distance education had research methods. So it's in the similar direction, but this time the data set is having a spread of not just distance education journals. There are many non-distance education, non-disciplinary journals which were publishing papers on online distance learning.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other things, Sarah? There were some comments I'm missing. If there are any things that we can.
Rosa had a question about the point in your presentation when you were talking about the countries that you had identified to include in the sample. I think with that, include. Perhaps Rosa is the better person to explain her comment there or question. Rosa, would you like to do that?
Yeah, thank you. I was wondering, how did you identify the country? I mean, by the sample they used for the study, or by the affiliation of the authors, or by the journal where the editorial of the journal is placed? How did you identify
it's the affiliation of the authors on that. So when a paper is or co-authored by people from 3 different countries, we still count that as 3, and therefore we got 88 countries in the database. So and we also see this is also a positive development for research in distance online learning, that there are researchers in 88 countries. This is probably the highest I have ever read in any similar study, the spread of researchers in 88 countries. So this is a positive development in that sense, as it was affiliation of the authors as the criteria.
Thank you. So that means that maybe the study is not related to those countries. I mean because there could be several differences between the country of the study. I think if the sample was from one particular country, and the results may not apply to another countries. I mean, that could be an interesting line of research, I think.
I think that's a very interesting point. But we were looking at productivity and publication trend, and we are not looking at the thematic scope of the study where it was done. Okay, so we are looking at researcher base in this particular angle. If the researcher base is something interesting to us as editors of journals, as researchers in the field, it's a positive development that we have increased researchers base in researchers in this online distance learning in 88 countries. It's something interesting to me, at least, because not many of the countries do really adopt more distance learning approaches before pandemic. Now many are doing, of course.
Uchota, you made a couple of observations. Did you want to say anything about those, or maybe they were just passing thoughts?
Sarah?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Sorry, I had a telephone call and had to dash out for a moment. But yes, one of the questions I asked there was about that descriptive work and case studies. And I think that has been addressed already, because when I got in, there was that discussion happening there. So I think I'm all right, as it were. I'm all right, thanks.
Does anybody want to pitch in another question before I make a comment? Linda.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for the seminar. Interesting. I just wondered, we're a mainly distance university, and I'm wondering whether there was actually a lack of publications from such universities, because it perhaps might not be called business as usual, but it certainly felt a little bit like that in comparison. Whereas now you were talking a lot about the words like emergency or things like that. So is there a breakdown on the types of universities where this research was undertaken?
Yeah, that's, Linda, it's a very interesting thing. We didn't look at that aspect. It would have been really interesting to have looked at where from the researchers coming. Dr. Sahu, it would have been a really interesting thing that we would have, and when we are coding the data set, if you would have coded the data set with where from the authors are coming, it's a distance teaching institution or a non-distance teaching institution, that would have been a really interesting thing analysis. But my take on this is that from the data that we have actually immersed ourselves in those studies, I see that the percentage of non-distance teaching universities would be fairly higher in this set of a group of papers that we looked at. There were papers from open universities and distance teaching institutions, but the data set clearly tells to me that those number of papers from distance teaching institution would be much lesser in comparison to the number of papers from non-distance teaching institutions, who were excited probably to have taken the role into a teaching online learning or adapting to distance learning in a new way, and they were trying to apply their research understanding techniques to whatever they are doing and reflecting and writing papers. As you can see, the 30% papers, 4% are having no methodology kind of things. So basically, they are a descriptive thing. So it was more of an excitement. A post study probably next year or sometime, if somebody is doing, we'll see that, well, is there a drop in number of papers? Because it could be also interesting to look at. So, but thank you very much, Linda, for this insight of asking this question.
Yeah, because I often thought, oh, maybe we should write some papers around this place, and we go, what would we write about? But I think now, one of the things that's really interesting is some of the universities have taken on board distance learning, or whatever you like to call it now, remote learning. And I think there's some lessons that we can learn, that they might have got some really interesting new insights because they're new. And then how do we take that back to the more traditional distance learning institutions and say, well, what now, post-COVID? What does it mean for our institutions like us? Apart from the increased competition, are there positives, or maybe are there positives or negatives? So there may be a paper or two in that.
I agree. I agree, Linda. The diagram that you showed, Dr. Sahu, with the not the concept map one, the one before, with all the lines and all the key words, the words that came out. This is in my institution that is mostly more traditional, but with a explicit distance component, with a dual. No, it's not dual university, but with the definition, the words were really, really important. Not undermining the distance learning section of the university that had the quality assurance messages in place for years and years and years, and suddenly everybody had to go online, and I and a couple of others fought hard to, let's not call that distance, please. That's not distance, that's emergency. That's, in our terms, we just said that's online. Of course, distance is online these days. We're in 2022 or 2020 back then, but online. So and this continues, and reflecting on the institutional sort of ways of thinking of things, it's continuing to be an issue. So I think this article is a really fantastic one for drawing out those various terms, and also helping to further the reflection on the things that you said, Linda. What's it like now? How is the impact of all of the research that was done in 2020, and Sanjay, and maybe over the following couple of years, how is that having an impact on places or parts of universities where they've had established distance learning programs for many years? Is that having an effect on the way people are thinking about what distance learning actually is, the way they talk about it and conceptualize it? Anyway, that's just an observation.
It's interesting, just today, I'm reading an article about problems with the student experience surveys. So if you take that one step further, and like the student experience surveys do my head in, because they have this weird dichotomy between online and face-to-face, and we know that's not true. So this is by Kelly Matthews from University of Queensland, and saying we need a better way of doing it. And so I think there's some lessons there for the quality people in nationally and internationally to take perhaps a post-COVID approach to what learning looks like.
Yeah, I think we have Som now online, and as the editor, I think we have a little time to close this session before Sarah will thank everybody. I would request Som to say something about the paper, the process that went through to publication of that paper, and how much he asked us to push for the changes that was required, so that my co-author, Dr. Sahu, would also appreciate what goes into the journal.
Thanks, Sanjay. I was my apologies, everyone. I had another session just before this, so I'm a bit late. So I'm really not into sync with the conversations that have been going on, but so I'll make some very general remarks. First of all, to thank Sanjay and Dr. Sahu and Dr. Pandey, is it, for doing this paper. When the paper first came to me, and I sort of, the first impressions were, well, this is great stuff. This is good stuff. There's some good stuff there. But as is always the case, and this is what I think Sanjay was referring to, is when we receive papers, and I'm a stickler for methodology. I mean, I was drilled in educational research methods as part of my doctoral training, so I'm very concerned about methodology. And over the 25 years that I've edited a journal, that's the first thing that I would go by, even if the outcomes of a paper are not that interesting. But if the authors have pursued their investigation in a systemic way or systematic way, then that's what educational research is about. That's what research is about. So I was impressed by the level of detail and the approach that the authors took. Of course, then we worked through with the authors and we sent out the papers for review, and the reviewers give their feedback. And I'm glad to see that the paper finally got published. And obviously from the conversations that have been going on, from what I hear Linda saying, there is possibility of further work along these lines, and as a final comment, I have noticed that research methodology is obviously a problem for a lot of people in education in particular, and that's something that we need to talk about and discuss. I have no concerns about that, no doubts about that. And more importantly, matching the research methodology with the research question is something that I always talk about as well. You have a research question, but which methodology then, or educational research methodology then, is appropriate to answer that question? And oftentimes people get that wrong. So these kinds of conversations and these kinds of seminars is part of what I suppose we all want to do, and what ODLAA is trying to do, to have a conversation. It's one thing to do the research and publish the paper, but having a discussion about this in this manner, I'm grateful for the authors for coming along and wanting to do this, and that's what ODLAA is trying to do. We can get as many as possible. But it's a very topical issue. It's a very important issue, and I'm certainly a stickler for that. And in my experience, I don't think I have allowed the publication of any paper in which the research methodology is flawed.
Thanks, Som. Dr. Sahu, your closing thoughts, because I have been speaking a lot, but your closing thoughts on any observation that you would like to share.
I would just like to say a very big thanks to Dr. Sahu and Sanjay for leading us in that presentation, and in his absence, Dr. Pandey as well. Som's words about the strength of the articles that are published in distance education is, you can see reflected in the high rating of the journal. It's a very important journal, and so these articles, such as yours, Sanjay and Dr. Sahu, is it says the quality of it is indicated by its being in that journal. In Distance Education Journal. You have provided us with some good things to think about, and I think, and speaking from my perspective, a really helpful way to think about the kind of research that's gone on in the last in recent times, because there's something different about it, and it's contributing to the ongoing thoughts that a place like institution like mine, and in institutions all over the place, are having to engage in the thinking to define what this thing is, and how to make it work with the students' best interests in mind. So many thanks. As you all know, this session is being recorded, and ODLAA has a YouTube channel, and in the not too distant future, probably within the week, we will have the recording of it on that channel, and there's the link to it. And before I go, I also want you to keep your eye out for notices about upcoming ODLAA webinars, and you'll find that information on the website, but also that an early notification that APOD Week is coming up. APOD Week is the Asia Pacific Open Education Week, and it's going to be held in early November, probably during the second week. And during that week, there'll be a series of events scheduled to talk about open education, but with a specific focus on global advocacy. So please keep your eye out for email alerts about that, as the program is set in stone, and all the information will also be on the ODLAA website. So thank you, presenters today. Thank you, everybody, for coming along and contributing to the discussion. I wish you well. Okay, then. Bye-bye.
Thank you.